I walked into a room one time to present a security strategy to a really important group of people. And I came in the room and I had dropped off my bag. And one of the gentlemen, at the very end of the room was mostly men and it was a really long table. And he said to me, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. I need coffee." It took me a second to put together the fact that he thought I was there to serve coffee to the people at the table. And the truth is, I went and got his coffee. And I brought it back and I set it in front of him and then proceeded to the whiteboard and gave him a presentation. You have a choice in that moment. You can be the victim or you can play the valor. And at that moment in time, this kicked in with me and I thought, you know what? I don't need to say anything. I got up in my presentation and knocked it out of the park. I didn't need to defend myself. I defended myself by being really good at my job.
Christine, thank you so much for joining us today. For anyone who isn't familiar with your background, can you give us a quick snapshot of who you are and what you do today at BlackBerry?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, I'm Christine Gadsby. I am Chief Security Advisor here for our secure communications business. So, I have been at BlackBerry for 17 years. And yes, that does take us back to the handset days. So, I was here. One of the things I was privileged to be able to do was to help the company transition from the handset into the security software supplier we are today. So that is my current role. I've done a bunch of roles here. I started by building the product security team when I came from Microsoft back in the day and then ran that function for quite a while. I was our CISO for a while, and now I have the privilege of being the chief security advisor. So now I go around and help advise governments on secure communication strategies, and then I bring that back internally too, as far as how we look at AI and governance and security frameworks that we put around that, and just fun things like that.
Tell us where you got started and how you ended up where you are today.
Well, that is such a great question. I did not think this is what I was going to do, partially because when I was growing up, this wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing in reality, and it certainly wasn't a thing for women. So it wasn't really ever exposed to me. I accidentally got into cybersecurity as a just a happenstance. I grew up just very poor, and I was a single mom and put myself through college. And one of the things that when I had started college that I had talked to my college counselor about is like, I don't really know what I want to do. And she was, bless her heart, she was amazing. She sat me down and said, "Hey, okay, let's take a look at kind of what you're good at." And so we did that, what are your interests? And then she asked me what was really kind of driving my choices. And I had said, well, I'm a single mom. I need to be able to feed my kids, and I was waiting tables at the time. And this was just a very valiant effort at the time. And I didn't know this, of course, looking back. But one thing she said to me is that there's two things that aren't going away: technology and crime. Those things are always going to be kind of growing in the industry, and they're always going to be developing. They're always going to be changing. And so one of the things that I had given her as my reasons for, the things that I love to do is I'm always tinkering with things. And I had a really great sense of dealing with crisis because I had grown up again in just a really tough time in a tough neighborhood with tough things, and I was really good at dealing with crisis. And so we ended up coming to this conclusion of, okay, well, IT is great at the time. Again, that was a great goal for me. So I ended up going in through the information technology side and starting my education there.
So, as you've climbed, from a practitioner role to vice president to now chief security advisor, what were the biggest obstacles that you had to navigate? And were any of them specifically tied to being a woman in the industry?
So yes, and I think overall there is some acceptance as women in technology that we need to just be okay with, in our minds so that we can start to deal with some of the solutions. And not that we're accepting that it's normal, but just to kind of resonate with us. And most of the time I've always felt like, I've had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. And that's the truth. It's been in pockets. It isn't everywhere. Not everywhere in my career has that been. But there are times when it's real. But I think with that question, I want to focus kind of on one thing that I had to learn along the way. And it's been really critical to me being able to digest those different kinds of things that just sort of pop up where you don't really know what to do about it. And The scenario I kinda wanna talk through is kind of the pick your battle scenario. I'll tell a
Yeah.
short story and hopefully this will make sense. So, I walked into a room one time to present a security strategy to a really important group of people. And I had just gotten off a plane and I kinda was dressed in my, outfit. It was a last minute thing and it was kind of an emergency replacement sort of thing, and I came in the room and I had dropped off my bag, and one of the gentlemen at the very end of the room was mostly men and it was a really long table, and he said to me, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. I need coffee." And it took me a second to put together the fact that he thought I was there to, to serve coffee to the people at the table. And my boss was at the end of the table as well, also a gentleman at the time. And I could see the look on his face going, "Oh my gosh, what is she going to do?" And the truth is, I went and got his coffee and I brought it back and I set it in front of him and then proceeded to the whiteboard and gave my presentation. And I tell this story because in these times, they're going to happen to you as a woman in technology. And it happens no matter what level of leadership that you're actually at. But here's the thing I want you to think about in your mind when these things happen. You have a choice in that moment. You can be the victim or you can play the valor. And at that moment in time, this kicked in with me and I thought, you know what? I don't need to say anything. I got up in my presentation and knocked it out of the park. Did I need to say anything? No, because everybody else in the room knew. I
Yeah.
didn't need to defend myself. I defended myself by being, really good at my job. And fast forward that day. So I asked him what he wanted for his coffee. I went out and I got his coffee and I brought it back and I set it down and I literally walked up to the, presentation. I gave my presentation. And as I'm presenting, I can see this guy's look on his face and he felt horrible. So the more, and he apologized to me and felt terrible. And to make it right, he apologized in front of everybody. And after that, my boss was like, "Christine, I cannot believe you did that. I was waiting for you to just turn around and nail this guy. And you absolutely could have. You had every right to just turn around and go, 'Excuse me, I have 20, whatever years in the industry, and here I am, trying to teach you something.'" And I did teach him something.
Mhm.
So my point with this story is that I didn't need to do anything. It happened on
Yep.
its own. And there are
Yep.
lots of areas where I reflect on that story now after it, where I kind of look back and I'm like, how many times has it happened to me where I've had the choice to be the victim or choose the valor? Now, that isn't always the case, right? There are going to be times when you need to say something, but in these times where you have a choice, I just want to encourage any woman listening to this to really think about it before you react and do something.
Mhm.
So
I bet it was a more powerful learning moment for that gentleman with the way that, you chose to react, because it could have been that you had an outburst and made him uncomfortable, but he apologized, and kind of the best outcome of that situation that you could wish for, I think.
I think it changed behavior in the room because it wasn't
Mhm.
just him. It was all
Yeah.
it was a room of like 25 men. I was the only woman. And I think all those 25 men really were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened." It was overpowering. So, yes, I agree. I think I always wanna change behavior. I don't ever wanna name and shame. I wanna change behavior. So I think if you go into it with the "how am I gonna change behavior" attitude, then some of those right lessons just sorta pop up.
Thank you for sharing how you handled it, because it's very, very powerful.
We didn't actually start the Leadership Bench program as a program that benefited women, but the amazing thing was when we opened it up to everybody, 97% of the people that signed up to participate were either underrepresented minorities or women.
Switching a little bit to some programs you've been involved in, you were instrumental in creating BlackBerry's Leadership Bench program, where about 90% of the participants are women or visible minorities. So, when you created Leadership Bench, what were you trying to solve, and what have you learned from that project?
I think I was in a conversation with one of my friends, and I was thinking about some of these cross organizational challenges and really how I was mentoring internally a bunch of women, and really how do I get them exposure up here? At the time, I was a senior executive and I'm blessed to have all this access to the C-suite. I talk to them all the time, but women below me don't. And so I really started thinking, how am I really going to take these women I'm mentoring and giving them opportunity to do all of the things we're talking about? They're all working on all these things I'm giving them to work on, but they never get exposure. at the time, I had a really good seat at the C-suite table, and I said, I need some projects to take a group of underrepresented at the time. I didn't even specify for females. So we brought it down to 3 projects as a team, and that's kind of when it took lift off. I worked with my HR team and I said, okay, hey, I've got 3 projects that cross, all these businesses. Like, hey, I need a group of volunteers. And so I set some parameters up because we had decided it would be just kind of all over the place if we didn't. So the first
Yeah.
rule was they had to have a mentor internally. And we do have a program for that. So that was, the first checkbox. And the second requirement was, they had to mentor someone else because the whole point was we were trying to figure out how to create a bench program. The
Mhm.
definition of it is how do we get leaders ready for the next big thing, right? And then I went to the C-suite and I said, all right, I need a list of leaders who need development. Who, on your leadership team do you feel like would benefit from coaching other leaders? Then I went back to HR and I said, all right, I've got the leadership, I've got the rules, I've got the program, I've got the goal, I've got the problems we're trying to solve. I need the people. So we figured out a way to, we actually opened it up to everybody. We didn't actually start the leadership bench program as a program that benefited women, but the amazing thing was when we opened it up to everybody, 97% of the people that signed up to participate were either underrepresented minorities or women,
Wow.
which blew
Nice.
us away. I just remember my HR leader at the time, we were like, this can't be real.
Yep.
So anyway, fast forward, we get the people, I match them up, and the whole point of this program and why I love talking about this program, anybody can do this. It's free. This did not cost up till now. I have not spent a dime. It's been my time, which of course I did get approved, but free meaning I'm not asking for budget. I'm asking for
Yeah.
time. So we took our 3 problems. We got this group of people together, and the whole point of this was to establish critical thinking and leadership development, not to spend money. So
Huh.
we took these 3 problems to this group of people. We had several levels of leadership mentoring the people below them. And we said, how are we going to solve these 3 problems? But you can't spend any money. You got to only solve them by changing the way we're doing things internally. So throughout the program, the C-level team was sponsoring it. And so the best thing was we got to read out to them at certain, increments of this challenge. It took a year. We did it in quarters. And every quarter we'd read out our progress. And we took turns with the leadership team presenting to the C suite. So they got access to the
Mhm.
CEO, which was crazy for some of these up and coming leaders. Haven't even talked to the CEO ever. So it was really amazing. We put in some mentoring there on presentation skills. And by the end of the program, it was fascinating. We leaders developed leaders. We learned where all the gaps were people would step in and help. It ended up taking probably a lot more of my time than I thought, but it was completely worth it. We did solve all 3 problems. We did
Okay.
not spend a dollar, but the first 6 months of it was just coming up with using the critical thinking skills to create the solution and not implement it. That was the rule. Nobody could implement anything. So it taught them how, the real business kind of drivers are putting a plan together and presenting your plan and defending it, thinking through, we taught them to think through what every executive's going to ask. And we ended
Mhm.
up presenting our final recommendations, and then we spent the next 6 months implementing them. So then they had to learn how to influence across business organizations and leadership levels. And so the learning in this was incredible. The end results were fabulous. The business grew, definitely benefited and grew. We had a bunch of retention rates out of it. A lot of people said, this is one of the reasons I stayed with the
Yeah.
company. I was learning. We did a lot of surveys along the way, and it was just fabulous. And again, anybody can recreate this. Anybody can reach out to me. I'm happy to, help you create it, but do this. It's free. Someone just needs to take charge and do it.
Yeah. It feels like all upside, right? For the company and for the participants. I mean, it's a master class in critical thinking and problem solving
Yes.
that you do with your day job.
Yes.
What more could you want?
Yes.
Is there any other advice you might have for leaders who want to implement something similar in their own organization?
I think the one thing that I would say, and this is another one of sort of the things that I talk a lot about, is finding a sponsor. If you want to do something like this and you have the idea, you need to go find, it's not just a mentor thing, you need to go find someone who will help you. Somebody, adequately positioned in your company to really stand by your side and sort of help you through kind of the permission thing and the driving and putting your. I mean, I put together an outline for the plan, and because I was going to
Yeah.
C-suite executives who needed that level of care.
Mhm.
But really just sit down and write your plan. Write it out, fact check it. Call me. I'll help. I think it really just needs it just needs a
Mhm.
driver.
You talked about mentors, mentees, and sponsors. What is the difference between a sponsor and a mentor?
So a mentor is somebody who might not work at your company. They might be a friend of yours, but they are where you want to be. So they are somebody who you look up to that has either a job or a skill or experience that you don't have that you want. So they're there to sort of teach you how to get that. A sponsor, on the other hand, is somebody who will help you get it. So that sponsor needs to buy into whatever you're selling basically or trying to do and is going to stand by your side and clear the path for you. And for
Oh,
women, this is incredibly important. I cannot say this enough. Having a mentor is fabulous, but if you don't have a sponsor, sometimes it's really hard to get anywhere. I've had a couple in my time here in the company, and I fully believe that they're the reason where I am in a leadership role. When I was promoted from senior director to VP, that's a huge jump in my company, big jump, and it requires a lot of work and it's documented work. You don't just get a promotion and someone decides it here. You have to pass a bar. And I found a sponsor. I couldn't do it without. So I got a C-suite executive, called that person, said, I've worked a lot with you. I really want to try and make the jump from senior director to vice president. Will you help me? And he did. And he sponsored me the whole way. It took us a year. He gave me
wow.
the stuff to work on, the things that I need to do internally, and it wasn't a secret. The other thing about sponsorships, it's not a secret. The C-suite knew that he was sponsoring me because he told them. I am sponsoring Christine. We all know that she's a great leader. She wants
Uh-huh.
to make that next step in her career, and we need to help her get there. And they have to agree. So the difference really mainly is learning a bunch of things that you need to know and putting those to use as your sponsor. So think of the sponsors like a level up from the mentor, like the person that's
Yep.
going to help you get it done. Always be having coffee is something I say. Have coffee with everybody or iced tea or whatever you drink, lemonade, who cares? Always be having coffee.
It's important to have this village, this network, these different roles, and you're a member of some women in technology groups. What have those communities meant to your career outside of your communities outside of BlackBerry? What have they meant to your career, and why do you think spaces like this are important?
Those are incredibly important because you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
Always be having coffee is something I say. Have coffee with everybody or iced tea or whatever you drink, lemonade, who cares?
Yep.
Always be having coffee. I have changed direction in so many things that I've worked on in my career and I'm a mom, right? So just in general, we all have this in common. We're wives, we're mothers, we're sisters, we're all working, we're all trying to get somewhere. When I hear some of these amazing women at these events that I go to, I have changed my mind on things so much. So be open to having coffee because it will influence how you think and you're going to be smarter together. And it
Hmm.
doesn't there's tons of them out there for whatever industry you're in. It's not just technology, but find
Sure.
them. Find your tribe and
Mhm.
then ask a lot of questions because then when you're encouraged to ask questions, you're encouraged to learn, you're going to teach others too. Everybody needs a mentor and a mentee and you're going to follow them there somewhere, right?
Thinking a little bit about kind of where things stand today, there's a lot of data about women in technology, especially in technology leadership, and it's still a little sobering here in 2026. So, from where you sit, what do you think is actually driving the gap at the leadership level?
Yeah, that's a great question and it's the one we just talked about, sponsorship. This should be a top-down mandate. The leadership bench program is a model that I learned early on in my career. That should be in every CEO's back pocket. That bench should be being prepared. And the only way to do that is to take that C-suite and say, who are you sponsoring to take your place? Not what is official on my list of my replacement when I retire. Who are you
Mhm.
sponsoring to be in this role in the next? Who else are you sponsoring to be a leader in this company? Who are you bringing up? Not who's your backfill. Different things altogether. So I think when that is driven from the top down, that mentality goes into the C-suite, it's so powerful because what happens is it trickles all the way down, right? Those C-suites go to their leaders and say, "All right, you guys all need to, this year and your goals, I want you to think about these things and I want you to do them." And then those leaders go down, and so then you have this whole culture of sponsoring people for whatever their challenges. It isn't necessarily always a promotion.
Yep.
Sometimes it's other things. Sometimes it's learning a skill, and sometimes you're in a role, like, I mean, in the role I'm in, typically at this level, we're here for a long time, so I'm not going for a promotion. Maybe I need a skill. But
Mhm.
really driving that culture, I really, really am just a huge sponsorship fan. I've seen it work, and I've seen companies fail when it isn't implemented.
And I hear a lot of companies, HR leaders say, "Oh yeah, we have succession planning. We're
Yeah,
good. We're good."
not
And succession planning and sponsoring doesn't sound like the same thing.
it's not. It's
No.
not at all, because really
Mhm.
succession planning is nominating somebody on a piece of paper, right? And sponsorship is really like, okay, who am I putting effort into growing? Those are the
Mhm.
differences, right? Anybody can put a name on a field. The other one is, who am I putting my effort into to actually grow them?
And when you think about, the industry, the tech industry as a whole, what do you think has been the most pervasive or stubborn obstacle? Where are people getting stuck?
I think it's in a few areas. I think one, as women, we tend to get underexposed to opportunities. I think in technology, as technology grows, sometimes we're not as fast to adopt things as men are, and I just see that. Part of this is just a fact of life. We're mothers, so, sometimes we're
Mhm.
raising children, and sometimes we're taking care of our parents, and it's kind of a compounding factor, right? And we don't necessarily jump on technology, I think, as fast. I think there's a few reasons why that happens, but also don't think I see, and I see it in pockets, right? But I don't think I see companies really understanding that there's a difference in how they need to talk to, making sure that those opportunities are not disproportionate to women. Maybe they don't have to go out and make it sure every single thing is for everybody, because the business drivers and roles definitely contribute to those factors. But making sure that it's not disappropriate is an effort, is what I don't see a lot. I have that benefit of having it.
Yeah.
So I know that my company goes out of its way to make sure that I'm included, because they know I'm a single mom with kids at home, even at my level. And so they're, always checking in to make sure. But I do see it.
Speaking of the new technology and what's available, AI seems to dominate every tech conversation and it's reshaping industries, including technology. So there has been a lot of research done and results published saying that women are now facing kind of a triple challenge. Fewer women entering AI roles, slower advancement in AI roles, and greater exposure to automation in the roles that they currently own. So, is this concerning to you as a woman leader in the industry?
Yeah, it is. I'm an AI advisor on, both externally and internally, and so I am noticing that, and I'm also noticing a few really outspoken women in my field knocking the kind of on the door of other women to make sure that they're remembering that this is here. We also, we don't, unless you're in a really high tech area of technology that is constantly being updated all the time. Sometimes the new things you're slower to adopt anyway, just as a company or as a region. Because I mean, again, if we're looking at this on a global scale, there's parts of the globe that are really good at diving into AI right now, and fast. The global south is just crazy faster, with adoption than we are. I think a couple of the challenges with women is they also, they face more of a automation exposure too, because they're historically steered into roles that are, I think, more ripe for AI displacement, data entry,
Mhm.
customer support, lower level analysts. They are in that area of technology. And, I think that they face just a higher risk of displacement by AI in those roles. So I think there's some things that we can talk about, and then, and how we impact it. And then I think there's others that just AI itself is just kind of, dispersing those lower level roles, where those are the roles that are friendly to moms, right? Good schedule, 8 to 5, and I can still have my kids and have dinner on the table, that kind of stuff. And so I think it's kind of an unfair advantage to start.
There is a statistic that has been published widely that 50% of women leave the tech industry in their mid 30s. In your experience, do you see that? And what do you think is driving that exodus?
Yeah, I absolutely 100% see it. And I think it's a few reasons. I think it starts women in their 30s, and I've actually talked to quite a few women in this sort of age group that have brought this up to me. Most women by their, I would say early to mid 30s, have kind of watched their male counterparts already get promoted, and they're on their first or second or third level of management, and they have not. And it's because they've been raising kids or doing these other things
Yep.
or not. Or, I mean, there could be many reasons, right? But it's that cumulative effect of being passed over for whatever reason it is. I take my summers off to spend it with my kids, or I'm just, whatever the reason is, it might not have anything to do with any one thing. But I think that system just sort of starts there at that mid 30s. And then, by mid career, I think in the next 10 years, the pay gap is there. The
Mhm.
men have been promoted on their second or third or fourth leadership level now. The women are still trying to fight for their second or third. And now maybe they're married with two kids and it's easier for the woman to stay home because they're staying home because they're not making as much. So I think it's almost like this journey of the longer you're in technology, the bigger the gap gets. And then, on the third tier of leadership where it gets really stressful for women and it becomes more of a choice of, do I want to work 60, 70 hours a week and put all this effort in, or do I want to, be at home with my kids doing all these other things, or do I want a career that's going to balance that? I think those are choices that women are often faced with more than men. And I'm not saying every man is not faced with that choice. I've definitely met a few men in my career and in my life who are staying home and raising children or single fathers, but I think a disproportionate amount of women are faced with that challenge.
What have you seen work in companies that have been successful in retaining women into those senior leadership roles like yourself? What can a company do to influence this?
That is the best question because it's just intention. It's so frustrating to me that companies deal with the output and they're frustrated because they don't understand it, but they're not intentionally trying to fix it. So if the leadership level at the top of the company is not intentional about fixing this problem, the problem is going to create the problem itself because it exists. Well, we have a mentorship program. Okay, well that doesn't do anything if you don't have sponsorship. So again, with the sponsorship also lies the responsibility at the C-suite to say, how are we accountable for this in the sponsorship program, and how do we reckon with our culture to make it more inviting like that? And that means taking on the really uncomfortable things like, harassment and bias reports. There was one time in my career, and I had never in my career said anything to an HR leader about something, and I did one time because it was so horrible to me that I felt bad enough where I finally thought I was going to go to HR, and I am not that kind of, talking to HR about this stuff at all. And I'll never forget it. She dismissed me completely. And it was this most senior HR leader at the time. And she just blew it off. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's what our company does, or that's what our culture is. That culture cannot exist. You have to reckon with that culture. And that means taking those bias reports seriously rather than just, managing them for whatever legal exposure you feel you're going to have. And none of this is a mystery. This is all
Mhm.
just organizations that are intentional will see better retention. And those decisions will be worth it when all of those leaders start to rise up in their company based on the program itself. It works. But again, without intention, nothing works. There's always a technology with what you love to do. They always match up because everything you love to do has some kind of technical footprint somewhere. If you find that, you'll never work a day.
For women maybe at the kind of opposite end of the spectrum who are maybe considering a career in technology, but they feel like they don't have the background for it. What advice would you give that cohort?
I love that. So, what I love about technology, and this is with security and technology, it's everywhere, right? So, I have had conversations with so many women who have had this question, and I have never failed to find them some kind of role or something to go, look at. Say you're a florist. Okay, I just made that up. But you're like, hey, I really love arranging flowers, but technology is kind of a cool. I would really love to kind of work my technology brain more. Great. How does technology combined with arranging flowers? Well, there's software developed to order flowers. There is software developed to arrange flowers, to teach online courses for flower arrangements. And maybe that's not a great example, but my point is there's always a technology with what you love to do. They always match up because everything you love to do has some kind of technical footprint somewhere. If you find that, you'll never work a day. Like, I love my job so much and what I do because I help people and governments be more secure. I don't work a day. I just love what I do. So that's natural progression, right? I'm naturally interested in what I'm doing. So I naturally achieve more because I love it. So I think you really just need to sit down and figure out what are the things that you love to do, and then where's the technology that maps, and then start trying to plan how you're going to get there rather than just kind of like, well, I like tech and I just go think I'll do something, because then
Mhm.
you won't succeed. When you
Yeah.
have a motivation and you have something that you're really passionate about, then go try and figure out how to get the skills. And this is where you need a mentor. LinkedIn is your most powerful thing in the planet for this kind of stuff. Go find someone who does an entry level job and ask them how they, how they got where they are. I have found 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, connect with me. I'm connected to like a gazillion people, and then I'll find you somebody. But
Mhm.
finding a mentor to get you where you need to be is the next step. And that's why mentors are valuable, because they will tell you what class or whatever to go take, or introduce you to somebody who might hire you. You never know. That's the other thing that's beautiful about technology. There is every role in technology. Technology has lawyers in it. It has
Mhm.
website developers in it. It has payroll people in it. It has HR in it. So whatever you're best at and wherever your passions are, it's there somewhere. You again have to connect those dots. For me, it was definitely my ability to handle crisis, which is why I ended up going from IT. It was really clear when I got into IT that crisis response was going to be where I ended up, and I got into security very fast after I got into IT, because I can, and that's what I'm good at. And crisis to me, and this may resonate with a lot of women, it was normal. Like that was my normal, because I didn't know any different until I was, my early 30s. So I would bet a lot of women are in that same sort of space in their life where to them this is just normal. So how do I map that to something that I can do in technology? Again, there's always a job in technology for whatever that is. You just have to find the right people to help you get there. That's the secret. It's not, and to be willing obviously to put some work into it, but as long as you have a mentor to help you figure those stuff out, the world is your oyster.
For women who are already in the tech industry, but maybe feel like they're stalling or that they've hit their ceiling, what can women do in that situation? How
Yeah,
can they leverage their mentorships or other things?
it's so common.
Mhm.
This is where I go back to a couple of things, right? There's all of those tech groups of women that everybody should be looking at. If that's their, you're stalled somewhere, you're stuck somewhere, you just don't feel like you're advancing. There's all kinds of things you can do. Obviously, number one, have a critical conversation with your boss, and if you need help having that conversation, there's all kinds of great books to read. Crucial Conversations, awesome book. If you haven't read it, every woman listening to this should read it once a year. I read it once a year. Really helps me have hard conversations, and that can be a hard conversation. But talking to your boss, I want some stretch goals. I'm ready to move on, or tell me what, it's better actually if you say, what are the skills that I need, or what are the things I need to do to move forward, or move forward, and whatever that looks like for you. It might not be a promotion, it might be lateral or something like that. Number two, those groups, the women in technology groups, there's so many of them and they're so good. Find your tribe. Ask around, what did you do? Hey, if I'm here stuck, what does that look like? A lot of those women in technology groups have smaller kind of executive women's forums too. They meet, I was part of one for a very long time where meet every, I don't know, every other week or so with a smaller group of women, and just, there's a sort of a leader of the group, and you're talking through these questions. Maybe ask the question to them. Peer review is really important. And then again, LinkedIn is your friend for this, for mentors. Ask who's already in that role. Again, 9.5 times out of 10, if you reach out to somebody, there's been a point in my career where I've done this just for advice on something where I wanted to know if I should, go this way or this way, left or right. I found people to be extremely helpful. And they just sometimes it's an email, or hey, would you have coffee with me? If you're local, again, have coffee with everybody. Or, hey, would you have a 15-minute call with me? Empower yourself. That's the last thing that I'll say on that is no one's going to do it for you.
So for the talent leaders, for the hiring managers, the people making the decisions about who gets a role, what do you want them to know from your view?
That's a critical role in where women are in an organization, and I've seen it in the last few companies that I've worked for. I've seen this even back in the day. Those are the critical roles on making sure hiring managers get fed the right information. So I think for anybody in the hiring decision, whether or not you're screening resumes, whether or not you're, putting them forward to a hiring manager, whether or not you're helping a hiring manager make those decisions, I would just really encourage you to be your own sponsor in this activity. If you know that there's an underrepresented candidate in there that has probably not been overpicked for various reasons for such a long time, I would encourage you to be that person's sponsor and push that forward and say, "Hey, have you reviewed this resume?" I mean, we all play a part in that, but again, that kind of even starts from leadership level too. That leadership level really has to go into that hiring process and say, I want a good mix. There's tons of stats that came out about this around taking the name off of a resume and not showing hiring managers' names and
Yeah.
information that would let them decide whether it was a male or female. And there's some crazy stats and some things that worked and some things that didn't. But I think again, it just comes back to that sponsorship and that awareness. If you're not thinking about it, it's easy to have a bias.
And be intentional in this role as well, right?
Exactly. If you're not, yeah, and that is the rule. If you're not intentional about this kind of stuff, you will be biased because that's our natural instinct, right? It's just our natural,
Yep.
and it's not a, that gets a really bad rap, but it's how we are as in nature. It's not, I know it's a terrible thing, but unless we have intention not to do it, we will, and that should be how we think about it, right?
We've definitely talked a lot about the challenges and things you can do to overcome them, and it's important to acknowledge that progress has been made. What gives you hope when you look at the next 5 to 10 years at women in technology?
I absolutely have a ton of hope, and there's a lot of terrible things we could talk about. There's a lot of great things we can talk about. I mean, look at the Leadership Bench program and what that did at our company. Anybody can do that. There's opportunity, right? Tons of opportunity. And the best thing about it is more people are talking about it. I mean, look at 7 years ago. We weren't talking about this and it was happening everywhere. It was such a huge problem. I do
Uh,
think that there's just more awareness, which helps more adoption. So I'm very optimistic. I really think that every woman listening to this gets involved somewhere, be a mentor to someone else. Even just that is helpful. So
uh,
there's tons of opportunity. Be the change. We can't just sit back and expect everyone else to do it. So a ton, yeah, absolutely. I think the next 5 years is going to be really, really crucial for women to get involved and make sure that they're kind of in charge of this destiny for sure.
my last question for you. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what is the one thing that you would tell your younger self as you start in your journey in the technology industry?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. My younger self was really hard on my younger self.
Mhm,
I was a teenage mom. If I look back on myself now, I would just tell myself, look at all the lessons you learned. Like somebody told
mhm,
me that one time and it just blew me away. Like all those life lessons you learned, look what you built out of that. Look how you brought that into other people's lives and how many people you've been able to help. So I would say to the young woman, like, don't be hard on yourself for the tough things you've done, growing up. Use them. I
mhm,
I am a successful leader partially because I know how to be scrappy and be a Swiss Army knife. I learned that from having a very tough childhood. So, I have to reflect on that it's a positive thing and not a negative thing. And I wish that I could tell my younger self, like, hey, just because you've gone through all this is going to make you an amazing leader someday. Use your disadvantages to be your advantages.
and give grace. Absolutely.
100%, 100%, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Your breadth of experience and exposure in the industry is going to help women. Thank you for time with us, but also just being such an advocate in the industry. As you've discussed, it's so important. And I think the one thing I'm going to take away from today is to be very intentional about the things that I do and the way that I do them. And I appreciate that. And I know everyone watching is going to take away a lot of advice and tips and as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.